Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors, episode 147.
Welcome to Life by Design, the podcast for chiropractors. Here's your host, Dr. Jamie Richards.
Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors. I'm your host, Dr. Jamie Richards, and I'm joined by, I will say, my colleague today, an old classmate of mine, Dr. Scott Vatcher. And Scott's in Australia, has been for the past 20 years, and has taken his practice from nothing to successful, sold his practice, moved on, and has now written a best-selling book. And something that really struck me when I saw this was Scott's new endeavor, and that's teaching chiropractors and helping chiropractors write their own book, or what we call authority marketing. It's something that personally I've been interested in for some time, had explored. I never went down that path. So when I saw that Scott was doing that, right away I wanted to get him on the podcast so I could share that with you. And we, really got a ton out of this interview. I've already set up a call with Scott in order to go deeper to find out how we can use this book writing opportunity in my own practice. And even for Life by Design for Chiropractors. So I know you're going to enjoy this episode of Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic. So Scott, welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors.
Great to be here.
Yeah, man, this is pretty exciting. 2 weeks in a row. You this week, Lawrence, Tam last week. For anybody who didn't listen to last week's episode, this is our new segment, Convos with Chiros, really playing off the comedians in cars, I guess. Is that the name of it, with Seinfeld? And
drinking coffee in a car, something.
Yeah, something like that. And so that's where I came up with the idea. And yeah, it's really interesting. I had a bunch of people comment last week, just, how like all these people were in your class. I'm like, yeah, this was our class. And while Lawrence might have been my first, you were probably my second. So, myself, you, and Lawrence, we had our mastermind group. And then, of course, we had a larger group with, Evan and Norm Detillieu and all these other people. I mean, we could just drop lots of names here on the show. So,
what was that called again? Innate?
The Circle of Innate.
Circle of Innate. Yes.
Yeah. So we had probably 25 students from our class, as part of this Circle of Innate, and we would get together. I mean, at least every couple of weeks at somebody's house, and we would be, discussing whatever. We brought speakers in. We were third year, second year. We brought in speakers. We actually even paid a fee. Remember, we all paid almost a membership fee, and then we paid some of the speakers to come in and come into our houses, and actually, they would do our checkups, and then they would come and speak and mentor us. And yeah, it was, and then the years above us, Minardi and James Chestnut, Ryan French, and you could just go on and on, a great list of other doctors. So, let's introduce our listeners, our viewers here to you, Scott. You and I know each other, so we're talking, like we just left off.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people here who are listening who have no idea who either I am, depending on where they found the podcast or the episode, and who you are. So why don't you give us a quick synopsis of where you are now, how you got there, and a little bit about your path, and then we'll dive into the book.
Yeah, sure. So, in Jamie's class, so that's 20 years now. Crazy.
Yeah, 2002. Yeah.
Yeah, well, 2003 for me, remember?
Right.
So,
that's another story.
Who knows if that story will come up, but
yeah.
A bit of a windy road to get to it. But so I graduated, and 3 days later, I was in Australia. So CMCC, and then 3 days. And then, do you remember you had a box of my stuff for like, I reckon it was 5 years?
Did you ever get it back?
I don't. Oh, did you send it to me?
I feel like I did.
I think I did. I don't even remember what was in it. It was probably just a waste of postage. Because student came over here, had one suitcase. And funny enough, in the first couple of months, what you do when you come to Australia, being Canadian, you buy a didgeridoo. And so I bought this.
Is that what you do? I had no idea.
There's a number of things, but there's one back in the corner there that you can't see because of this cool background.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Mine too.
But bought a didgeridoo, and I bought it specifically so it would fit in my suitcase sideways. And so I was traveling around locuming for a couple of years and put this didgeridoo in there. I did learn how to circular breathe.
Okay, well, that's
good.
Cool.
That's good. Which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And my initial plan was go to Australia for a year, do locuming, and then move to Spain for a year, and then go to Ireland for a year, and then come back to Canada.
Right. And
It's been 20 years.
You're from Newfoundland, right?
From Newfoundland, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, moved up to Toronto for Chiro school.
Yeah.
But I'm still here in Australia. So
right. Yeah,
if the plan goes, if I leave soon, then I'll have to do 20 years in Spain, 20 years in Ireland, and then maybe come back to Canada.
That's right.
Although I don't think I want to come back.
Well, between Canada and Australia, I'm not sure, if one's better than the other, but
at this stage, I think Australia is much better, to be honest.
Okay, well, that's good.
It's getting better anyway. But anyways, back to the story. So
yes.
Came over here, locumed, a few years into that, did an associateship, then bought a practice. And then about 7 months ago, after owning that for 15 years, sold the practice. And now I'm on to the next stage. So
awesome.
Still practicing as a chiropractor, but really changing things up and seeing if I can, leverage my time and I suppose what I've learned and knowledge and everything to help other chiropractors.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's, it's interesting. That's been the theme, the first 2 episodes here, with me essentially leaving practice and now just being the managing partner and focusing on Life by Design. And then Lawrence having done that already and then making his next leap, which I think he'll be announcing soon. I don't know if he's told anybody where he's going, but he's jumping again. And then here you are having done that, 7 months ago and onto that. So before we get into that though, I do want to circle back. I think there's some value here. Let's talk about that story from CMCC just a little bit. I think we're talking about leaping and challenges and learning how to overcome adversity. I mean, you and a small group of you with, whether Norm and Evan, I believe. Yeah. And, really face extreme adversity in school. So if I'll tell it from my perspective and then you can jump in and kind of fill in the gaps. But, we were all ready to graduate. And I remember actually getting the picture, maybe you remember this, on the steps, the graduation picture out front.
Yep.
And I remember that was the day that, the first, buzz of, hey, something's up. Some students are going to get in trouble. That was the first day that happened. And I remember all of us were.
Let me fill in the gap there.
Oh, okay.
We were doing our last exam. I think it was jurisprudence, our very last exam, like literally just a bit of a cakewalk to be graduated. We were like all sitting down at our chairs, ready to go, going, this is it, last exam, we're done. And somebody walked by, and I can't remember who, because I was at the time like, what's going on here, and put a letter on my desk at the very beginning of the last exam.
No.
Yeah, that's how I found out what was going on. So anyways,
wow.
Go ahead.
Well, so
we'll get into what happened.
Yeah, all I remember is, there was the buzz like, hey, students are getting in trouble for practicing network inside of the student clinic is essentially, what it was. And somebody told somebody, and it was a non-certified technique that wasn't taught at the school. But the backstory is, we had the circle of innate. We were very outspoken for subluxation inside of our clinic and inside of practice. We were known as the subbies in the school. And so there was a real push among the teachers and the faculty to really shut down subluxation at that time. And, only 2 or 3 years prior to us, James Chestnut was going through, and James really battled them, and really crushed them to some degree.
I think I remember like one of the big things that happened was we had to get signed off on all of our diagnosis, and he actually got signed off for calling for a diagnosis of subluxation, and that was his claim to fame at the time.
And that class really pushed through, and so then the following class and then ours, they were really trying to stomp it out and hoping that they didn't have students that were going to be able to push back against it. And here we were, you guys were right at the point of graduation. I just remember saying to our little group, we're like, oh, they're not gonna, what's the worst they're gonna do? Like slap our wrists? I said, we're graduating in like a week. Right? You finished 4 years of chiropractic school. You've paid 4 years of tuition. Like, it's done. They're going to say, hey, you shouldn't do that, and don't do that. And that's what I assumed, but that's not what happened. And so why don't you pick up from there?
Yeah. I mean, and a bit more of the backstory is within the clinic, it was only diversified. That was the only thing you were allowed to do. But I'll tell you, from doing observations, everyone was doing something different besides diversified.
Everybody,
right? Like
everybody, all of
any
us.
other technique you could think of, like Minardi as an example, doing Thompson. Like, duh. Of course,
I was doing
Toggle.
Thompson, I was doing network. I was doing all these other things, and lots of people. It wasn't just you, Evan, and Norm.
No, it was lots of people, but for some reason we were known because as part of our thing, we came up with a technique group around tonal techniques.
Gotcha.
And we're teaching some stuff like that. So, yeah. So, I mean, essentially what happened was we were very close to being kicked out without graduating. And the interesting part was there was a seminar in Toronto at the time. And so the president of Parker was there at the time.
Fabrizio.
Yeah. And he actually said, listen, if you get expelled, we can't take you.
Right.
Because when you're expelled from one college, you can't go to another. So they were literally like dangling in front of us. You will never practice.
4 years, you just finished you're ready to graduate.
Got the letter that we were under suspicion or under whatever it was at the last exam. And so it ended up going on that it was a year and a half later, we had to repeat our whole fourth year.
Oh my gosh. It's painful today, even just thinking about it.
All of our clinic numbers, all of our whole 350 visits in a year. I remember all three of us, I think I was done my numbers in 4 months. Like I was, because by then, I was ready to be chiro. I was like, sure. I knew, and so it cost us
legal fees, right?
Six figures in legal fees.
Yeah.
And it was
plus going back and paying for another year.
Yeah. So it put me behind a phenomenal amount.
Oh, jeez.
And literally the whole time, like I was to the point where I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? Because it doesn't look good that I'm going to be a chiropractor.
Right.
And so I was thinking teacher. I was like, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. So it really got to that point where it was dangling by a thread about that. So it was pretty scary. It was adversity to the max.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of the doctors listening in, if you could just imagine the day you're ready to graduate and how much you're ready to rip up everything from that school. As much as you might have loved your school, you're just like, I am freaking out of here. And these guys were then told maybe they wouldn't practice again. And then 6 figures later, they were able to, had to redo their fourth year, pay for it. And Norm had to wait 2 years if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. I mean, as unfortunate, or I mean, you might even call it unfair, he got the worst of it.
Yeah. Crazy. And so, we're talking about leaping and facing adversity. And again, just those are the things that shape people. And I'm sure you look back now, and as much as you still wish you hadn't had it, I'm 100% certain there's some pretty, stunning lessons you've learned from it. And you look back and you can probably attribute some of that to your success today.
Yeah. A big one is, the old cliche of gratitude, right? And really being grateful for where you are and how you got there, because where you are in life is a accumulation of everything that's happened to you in your past and then how you dealt with it.
Right. So let's talk about the books. It's really interesting to me when I saw that you had written the book, and then you had sent me kind of a link, said, hey, I just wrote this book. And I was like, wow, this is pretty awesome. And we'll get into the backstory of it. I had personally looked into writing a book years ago, and just the process felt like it was just so overwhelming. And I'm sure you've heard this from other people. So I'm really curious about your kind of journey into it. So why don't you start with what led you to think, I'm going to write a book? And then how did you figure out what the steps were in order to do that?
It was actually a patient of mine, a client of mine. He had been a client for a long, long time. When I first bought my practice in 2007 from another Canadian guy, he was a client of his. So way back in 2007, he lost track for a while and left for a number of years, but then came back. And super great guys, become a friend. And he does sort of like real estate. He helps people buy houses, investment properties though.
Okay.
And he wrote a book. And so he utilized a company to help him write a book. And he said, listen, it's one of the best things I did for my business. I was like, I've always thought about writing a book. Maybe I should. And at that point was actually my focus for writing a book was my dad's group, Daddius.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was my focus for writing the book. For the first 6 months of a 12-month program, I was like, I'm going to write a book for dads. And I had it all planned out and was probably about half written, and then totally switched gears and went, you know what? I think I should write a book about not really about chiropractic at
Right,
all,
right,
but more
right.
about accompanying a practice and,
Right.
and how to utilize a book to help a lot of different areas in practice. So switch gears. And so I had to really go quick because I only had a 12-month program, but it ended up taking me way longer than that anyway. I did a lot of it on my own. Took roughly about 1,000 hours.
Okay.
So, that's, if you look at it, you break it into a 40-hour work week, it's 6 months of 40-hour work week. So it took, I know.
So that's pretty daunting though. You're talking to, us as doctors, we're busy in practice. That's a pretty daunting task. And I think that alone would probably have lots of people shy away from it. And I'm hoping you have some possible solutions for us, because I hear that and I'm like, yeah, a book would be nice too, but I don't know if I have 1,000 hours to put into that.
Well, it gets worse, because that was the book.
Let's go.
Because that was the book. Now, these days, anyone can write a book and throw it up on Amazon and get your mom and your auntie to buy it.
Gotcha.
Right. And so then, technically you've got a book.
Right.
But what's the point of writing the book is the big question you need to ask yourself. Why do I want to write a book? Because I created a program, we'll talk about it, but basically one reason you might want to write a book is because you have this huge burning desire to get a specific idea out to the world that you haven't seen done before. And you got an amazing, like, you've been thinking about a book and you've got this idea that you really need to get out there. That's a great reason to write a book. But it's not what I help chiros to do.
Right.
What I do is help chiros to get a book, become an author.
Right.
And utilize the book, the engine behind the book, what I call basically the book behind the book.
Gotcha.
So back to It Gets Worse. Took me about 1,000 hours to write the book. Took me about 2,000 hours to get everything organized and ready for the online version of everything. Really? So that's
what are some of the what are some of the pieces when you say get it ready for the online version? I'm sure a lot of people don't even know what those things could be. What are some of the pieces that you would have to have in place?
Yeah, so to have it as an engine for growth, right? Okay. So for me, it's for chiropractors to help them grow their practices in certain ways, right? Whether that's grow it in volume or feel good in charging more, so you don't have to see as many people, but you can charge more. So lots of different scenarios there. What's that?
Said I like that one.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people are starting to like that one. I do too. But some of the pieces are, once the book is done, then you got to think about, okay, how am I going to market the book?
Right.
Because I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it's something like 6,000 new books a day go on Amazon.
Wow.
It's phenomenal, the amount of books, but most of them will do nothing and go nowhere. So how do I use the book to leverage it to get what I want, right? And so that means in my case was creating funnels around the book. So funnels is a big one. Creating free lead magnets. Yep. Creating online membership sites, creating 30-day challenges and programs, creating the posters and handouts, creating the ebooks that surround the program, creating what else? Membership portals, then programs around how to use the book to get into corporate, how to use the book for webinars. So the list goes on and on and on. Right. And so another huge one that I'm super excited about, it's nowhere near complete yet, is to do the massive upgrade to the particular, like the newsletter,
Gotcha.
But what I'm doing is creating an online digital health and lifestyle magazine.
Okay.
And then that will be going out as a monthly feature. So think about it like your newsletter, but on steroids.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you got the book done, you went through all these different steps to, get it to grow. It became a bestseller, right? I'm pretty sure.
Seven categories. So, it was,
Nice.
I was shooting for one. It was like, as long as I get one, I'll be happy. And yeah, 7 categories.
So categories in terms of like fitness, that type of category.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And then did you use the book or have you used the book? What has it done for your practice? I know you're probably already full and waitlisted anyway, but what has that done for your practice? What have you seen? Because I think for people listening, they're probably not thinking of using a book in the way you are, which is creating a book to then become an expert in showing chiropractors how to use a book. For local doctors, I think of it for my associate. We already talked to it today in advance of this interview. I said, "Oh, this is going to be a great thing." And I'm already interested in writing a book with my associate, with Scott, so we can use that in our local market. So what did you see in your local market that chiropractors could expect and get excited about?
So it was quite interesting. One of the, I guess one of the things that I like the most is when I hand a book over to somebody, the look in their eyes. It's a different kind of look. There is a real thank you look. Like, wow, this is a big thing that I'm handing you, this book that can really help me. And so it was really cool. And one of the greatest feedback I got was it was 2 separate people actually in the practice itself. And they didn't speak English as a first language.
Okay.
And so both of them had come up, and after they read the book was like, I really loved your book. It actually made sense to me. And with English as a second language, that's a huge pat on my back to go, okay, I made it simple enough.
Right.
Yeah.
I can just think of all these, I can envision the interactions and just, I said, I was having this conversation today. I can just imagine a new patient walking in and, you got the book up on the table. Like imagine they leave their first visit and, here's your takeaways from your case review and, oh, here's a book, right? Signed by Dr. Jamie, Dr. Steve. This is a gift for you. Welcome to our practice. All those kind of things. Just the feeling of authority that person leaves with. You don't think when they come back for their day 2 or, thinking of referring somebody. Oh yeah, my chiropractor is an author. My chiropractor wrote a book. He wrote the book on the topic, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. It's a very cool, I'll call it a tool, really, right? Sure. Like what's inside the book, although great value, is less than the value it portrays as being a best-selling author.
Totally.
Yeah.
So then, let's talk about, the solution here. So I'm a chiropractor. I'm sold on this idea. I was pre-sold on this idea of writing a book. And then, then I hear all the things you tell me that need to go into it. Now I'm freaked out, right? I don't have 3,000 hours, but I want a book. So, bridge this gap for me. How is it that in your new model, your vision, the company you're creating, I believe it's called co-authorized, correct?
Yeah.
Is it specific to chiropractors? How do you help people? I'm excited to learn about this, and I know other people are going to have this question. So just, give it all to us. What happens? How do we work together on a project?
So it's a concept I've not seen before. Okay. One that's similar that people may have seen is when you say it was a book around chiropractic for chiropractors, you'd get, say, 20 different chiropractors together.
Right.
And each would write a chapter.
Gotcha.
Right. And then you can call it I guess, technically a co-authorized book, right? You wrote one chapter, other chiropractors wrote the other 19 chapters, each get a topic.
Gotcha.
My concept is different in that it's leveraging what I've already done, including the time for the online portion, like I said, which was double the length of time of writing a book.
Right.
And using basically the bones of my book and then putting your spin on it.
Gotcha.
So essentially how it works from the behind the scenes, giving you, full sort of what's transparency around how it works is you get to title the book, subtitle the book, we create it for you, but create the cover that's, completely original and branded to you. You write the acknowledgement section, the dedication, the introduction chapter, the little bit about what's inside the book about chiropractic. So it is a true co-author where you put your little bits and pieces into it, which should take, what I'm seeing is that it takes longer than expected even to just do that little bit of stuff.
Yeah.
But utilizing what I've already done and branding it for you. So it is a true co-author in that you do little bits and pieces of it, but the bones of it is done. And then all of the online stuff, although it's basically the same, it's white labeled or branded for you and your brand as well. So you don't have to rewrite all the stuff. So it's really, I call it almost like a turnkey marketing solution.
Okay. So now I'm asking questions for myself.
Yes.
Let's say, how customizable is it? You talk about the title, the subtitle. Obviously, depending on the title, the content inside has to match that to some degree. And I know your book was about the specific topic. How much of the internal content of the book can be modified and changed to match, what it is that, let's say because I have a title in mind already. Let's say, it doesn't match up exactly with what you have already pre-written. Is that customizable as well?
To a certain degree, yes. And at this stage, because I'm basically at the very beginning and in beta phase, I'm pretty open to seeing what that means, if you know what I mean. Right?
Yeah. Well, I love being beta, so that's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. One, it's way cheaper. Two, 100%. I give you everything, right? Because
exactly.
Your success is my success.
That's right. Well, you want to see how it works, right? And then for everybody listening, I think this is a huge opportunity and we're going to make sure this is in the group and this will go out on the podcast and make sure everybody gets kind of access to where to reach you. And I'm sure there's a limited number of people you can take in this beta phase, right? So just if you do want to talk to Scott about co-authorize and what that means, you're gonna have to beat me to it. So just know you're already second on the list because Scott, you can put me on the list and set up a call, and let's touch base after and figure out that. But yeah, I think it's great. When you said let's talk about that, I thought this is perfect. We could have lots of other topics, but sure, chiropractors are super enamored by the shiny penny. Do online marketing and funnels, and all that stuff's great. Those are just other tools.
Yes.
But I do think there's something about a book that is powerful. You've heard Dean Jackson talk about it. There's, other companies that talk about this, but there's nothing like this within chiropractic, and so I think you've done a nice job of niching yourself in there. And I think there's a huge need. Scott, I think this is a super smart play on your part. So yeah, why don't you add in anything you want to throw in here about, the why you think people should write a book that you haven't talked about, or any additional thoughts or ideas. Go for it.
Yeah, I think coming back to sort of what you'd asked about before with what kind of things have changed for me, and like you said, basically I'm as busy as I need and want to be in practice. I didn't write the book for that reason. Like I said, when I started the program, it was for dad book.
Right.
Which is still being written, by the way, but it's very close. So that's exciting too.
That's good.
The second book's coming out. That one's going to be co-authored as well. Me and Ev. You might get Ev on the show at one point.
That's awesome.
Yeah?
That's awesome.
Ev's another classmate.
That's right.
So it wasn't really about that for me. It was really about the journey of it. But when I did it and I realized how much potential is in it, that's where I said to myself, maybe I need to step outside of what I'm doing now. And, I think Lawrence even talked about it last week. And one of the big things for me going back to selling my practice was I asked myself, okay, fast forward 20 years, can I see myself still doing this? And being an active practice, although I believe in our mastermind groups, I think all three of us would have said 95, still adjusting.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we all did that, right?
Yeah.
But, that's not where I want to be. I may go back to it, right? This could be a couple of years sabbatical and then get back into it. But life took me in this different direction, and I'm super excited. And I do believe that whether it's luck or fortune or just hard work or whatever, I think all three of us talking about that with our mastermind group really found the success we wanted to within our practice, and proved it to ourselves that that was a thing that we could do, and we did. Mm-hmm. And then to move on to be able to help others, because I think there are a lot of chiropractors struggling, right? And not because, because of many reasons, but not necessarily because of what they're doing, but it might be what they're not doing. And that's getting themselves out there, becoming bigger authorities. And so through this process of writing the book, it wasn't in the beginning, but it was as time went through. It's like, you know what, I can use this and help other chiropractors without spending the time, because that is definitely of the chiropractors I've talked to about the program. The first thing is, I always thought about writing a book, but I couldn't find the time, or I don't find the time. I don't have the money, right? Yep. So there's ghostwriters who could help you write your own book. Yeah. But that's usually in the range of 50, 100 grand.
Dude, I did an interview. I did a call with a company to ghostwrite a book for me, and it was like 30 to 50 grand.
Yeah. And then that's just the book.
That's just the book.
Right. That's not the online engine that I've created around this. So super exciting. I'm just in that beginning phase. So yeah, if anyone's interested, just have a chat with me, because what I'm trying, I met up with a chiropractor buddy of mine here yesterday on the Gold Coast. And he's like, tell me about this program. Like, I kind of get it, but I don't really get it. And so 45 minutes later, he was like, okay, I got it a lot more, but I still don't overly get it. So I'm really trying to get the messaging down properly. So if this piques your interest, you're like, I don't really understand it all, but it kind of sounds cool. At this stage, book a call. There's no pressure. I'm not a pressure salesman. I'm not going to be like, okay, so at the end of this call, if you say yes now, you'll get it. No. This is not the decision you make on a whim. Yeah. It's a bigger decision, but it could be one of the best ones you make in practice.
Yeah. And I'll double that with anybody who knows Scott knows that is not his style of communication, in any way whatsoever. So I'm looking forward to getting on the call, because I already have a ton of questions that I didn't ask today that are more specific to me. So everybody else get in line. And then, mine might even be more than one. I'm thinking my office, we got Life by Design for chiropractors. I got Life by Design. So, we got a lot of different companies that could use an authority piece. That's for sure.
Well, that's actually one of the other big questions I've been asked is, or that has come up through conversations, is like, oh, I love this idea. This could be my first book to get me started on my own book. And so in the makings is me creating a publishing company to help people write their full own book. But that's not what I'm doing right now.
Gotcha.
That's watered down. I need to get this thing off the ground and solidified. So the co-authorize is what I'm doing now. But, I still think there's a massive market to help chiropractors write their own books as well.
Yeah, man, books are still legit. I don't care what people talking about, well, it's all digital and online, and, books are still a thing, and
Kindle.
I think, there's just so many opportunities here. We could go on forever, but Scott, I'll send people your way, that's for sure. And I look forward to you and I getting together, talking about this a little further. So make sure you just shoot me a DM here afterwards, and we'll set up a time. And everybody else, thank you for listening in to the podcast, the convos with Chiros, however you're catching this, and keep paying attention. Invite people here into the retention-based practice group, or if you're listening to the podcast, join inside the retention-based practice group so you can catch these live stream and ask questions as well. And as always, thank you for joining the drive to 1 million families worldwide living life by design. And that is the exact wrong exit to this podcast. So I want to see if I could catch you there. We have too many podcasts. That's the layperson podcast. So thank you for listening to Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic.